Have you never wondered why I drink only distilled water?
They're poisoning the blood of our country.
Well, the first thing you have to do is to stop the bleeding.
A foreign substance is introduced.
Poisoning the blood of our country.
Into our precious bodily fluids.
Hail Trump!
And you know, getting them out will be a bloody story.
Women sense my power. And they seek the life essence.
I love women. This is a guy that was all man.
I do deny them my essence.
This weird obsession with crowd sizes.
In this video, I will examine themes from director Stanley Kubrick's 1964 Cold War satire, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. In the event that a Russian nuclear sneak attack takes out the U.S. president, attack plan R assigns the power to order a nuclear counterstrike to a lower echelon commander. Once this lower echelon commander issues the go code, the radios of the entire 843rd Wing are all rerouted to a device called CRM-114 that is designed to cut the B-52 bombers off from any attempt by the enemy to issue fake or conflicting orders. Only those messages containing the correct three-letter code prefix can order the bombers to pull out of bombing Russia. Russia did not attack America at all. To the contrary, it is Ripper who launches a surprise attack on Russia because Russia, he believes, is sneaking fluoride into America's water supplies.
Have you ever seen a commie drink a glass of water?
Ripper came up with his theory after the act of lovemaking left him feeling weak. Being second in command under the president and the only person who knows the recall code, General Ripper believes that confiscating all of the radios on the base will keep the enemy from sending conflicting and confusing orders to the soldiers under his command, who will have no choice but to follow his orders all the way to completion. Ripper's fear of Russian invasion and contaminated water are synonymous with the weakness he feels after having sex. And since Ripper also claims that he denies women his essence, which is also synonymous with his C, the recall code POE, which stands for purity of essence, explains why Ripper orders soldiers under his command to protect the air base from Russian imposters disguised as U.S. soldiers. Ripper's theory that communists are secretly adding fluoride to America's water supplies also explains his fear of having his purity of essence or seed taken or depleted during the act of love. And in addition to denying women his essence, Ripper also warns the soldiers under his command at the Air Force Base not to trust anyone, to fire on anyone or anything within 200 yards of the base, and to shoot first and ask questions later. For it is better to lose a few soldiers through accident than to lose the entire base through the type of carelessness that is demonstrated by Buck Turgidson, who jeopardizes national security by allowing his secretary, Miss Scott, to use his red telephone, which also happens to be his direct line to the president. And then there is President Muffley, who invites a Russian spy claiming to be Russia's ambassador into the war room. Therefore, Turgidson and President Muffley letting down their defenses and compromising national security is tantamount to Russia in purifying America's precious bodily fluids with fluoride, as well as America recruiting its former enemy in the form of Werner von Braun to develop its space program.
They're poisoning the blood of our country.
President Merkin Muffley debriefs Air Force General Buck Turgidson, who was the only person to speak with Commander Ripper prior to Ripper sending the 843rd Wing to bomb Russia and putting the base at Burleson on lockdown. Despite the fact that only the president can authorize a nuclear strike, an emergency clause called Plan R gives the second in chain of command the authority to order a counterstrike in the event that a Russian sneak attack takes out the president. Let's think of Plan R as a human being in which the first in chain of command, or the head, replaces the tail, and the second in chain of command, or the tail, replaces the head. The head in this metaphor would be the president, and the tail would be Jack D. Ripper, ordering soldiers to shoot first and ask questions later, such as children and adolescents who act on impulse without exercising forethought or self-discipline. In this film, the actions of General Turgidson and President Muffley are controlled not by their heads but by lower echelon impulses or commanders, which makes them careless, weak, and vulnerable to infiltration and deception. Early in the film, General Ripper orders Group Captain Lionel Mandrake to confiscate all of the radios from all of the soldiers on the base so that they can be focused on killing the Russians who are attempting to overtake the base. What the soldiers at the base do not know is that they are shooting it out with fellow members of the U.S. Army and not the Russians. The soldiers on the base are quickly defeated and captured. Ripper's capture is a metaphor of the first failed attempt to stop the American bomber from triggering the doomsday device later in the film. As the doomsday device is triggered by an attack, Ripper's decision to issue Plan R to the 843rd Wing to attack Russia is also triggered by a perceived threat.
Women sense my power, and they seek the life essence.
Which is Russia polluting America's water supply with fluoride, an idea that Ripper developed during the act of sex, in which he experienced a profound sense of fatigue and emptiness. Therefore, to avoid these feelings and to protect the integrity of his essence or bodily fluids, Ripper commits suicide by shooting himself in the head to avoid being captured and tortured into giving up the recall code. His suicide is a form of decapitation, symbolizing his belief that war is too important to be left to politicians, since Plan R gives him, second in chain of command, the power to not only authorize a counterstrike, but to also separate the head or president from the body.
War is too important to be left to politicians.
Which would, in this metaphor, be the bombers, by switching the radios of the planes over to the CRM-114, a device that is designed not to receive messages unless those messages contain the correct three-letter code prefix, which is also a metaphor of Ripper's decision to confiscate all of the radios on the base to keep his soldiers from receiving orders that conflict with his orders. Now let's return to Dr. Strangelove, where President Muffley wants to pull back the B-52 bombers that Ripper deployed to bomb Russia. But it is too late because the normal radios on the bombers are switched over to the CRM-114 receiver, which is designed to ignore messages that are not preceded by the correct three-letter prefix that only Ripper knows. President Muffley invites the Russian ambassador into the war room.
He'll see everything. He'll see the big board.
Where the ambassador warns the president that Russia has a doomsday device that is designed to destroy all life on Earth if provoked by an attack.
It is not a thing a sane man would do.
The president turns to his director of weapons research and development and former Nazi, Dr. Strangelove, for a second opinion. There is no way to stop the bombers from attacking Russia, as there is no way to untrigger the doomsday device after it has been triggered, and as there is no way to untrigger an orgasm once it has been reached. For remember that an orgasm is the sudden discharge of pent-up sexual excitement during the sexual response cycle. Remember also that reflexes are automatic motor responses which operate outside of perceptual thinking. Therefore, as a woman responding to sexual stimulation, so too are the bombs of the doomsday machine, concealed and yet triggered to automatically respond or explode when provoked or stimulated by another bomb. This metaphor of how the doomsday device works also applies to why Dr. Strangelove cannot control his withered hand at the end of the film. More on this later. Now let's look at the fleet of bombers under General Ripper's command. After he issues the go code to attack Russia, the radios in the bombers are switched over to the CRM-114 receiver, which blocks out all outside messages except those messages containing the correct three-letter prefix. Therefore, as long as Ripper can retain control of his body during the act of sex, he can deny women his power, and likewise, as long as President Muffley can communicate with the bombers, he can recall them. However, President Muffley cannot recall the bombers due to the fact that their normal radios under Plan R have been rerouted to the CRM-114 receiver, and Ripper is the only one who knows the code. Mandrake deciphers the recall code out of some random notes from Ripper's notepad and phones the president, who relays the code to the Strategic Air Command, who in turn relays the code to the planes Ripper deployed to bomb Russia. All but 4 of the bombers receive the order and pull out. Russia fires missiles at the 4 remaining bombers. One of the bombers survives the missile strike, but its CRM-114 receiver is destroyed, which blocks it from receiving the recall code to abort its mission. And in addition to destroying the bomber's CRM-114 receiver, the missile attack has also ruptured the plane's fuel tank, which is leaking badly. Realizing that they cannot reach their primary target, Major Kong selects a closer target and flies the plane at a lower altitude to avoid Russian radar and to pull off a sneak attack. With these 2 concepts in mind, let's return to Dr. Strangelove. But let's remember that Attack Plan R empowers a lower echelon commander to order a nuclear counterstrike in the event that the normal chain of command is disrupted or decapitated by a surprise first strike. The lower echelon commander in the Plan R metaphor is everything from the neck down. It should also be crystal clear that as an automated and irrevocable decision-making system, the Doomsday device is comparable to an orgasm, which cannot be stopped, delayed, or controlled in any way after being triggered. It should also be crystal clear that the Russian radar picking up the U.S. planes in its airspace is a metaphor of women sensing Ripper's power during the act of love.
I do not avoid women, Mandrake, but I do deny them my essence.
Therefore, Kong's decision to fly the bomber under Russia's radar in order to pull off a sneak attack is analogous to Ripper's attempt to enjoy women without giving them his quote-unquote essence. Remember, Ripper is convinced that Russia is putting fluoride in America's water, which he interpreted from the fatigue and emptiness he feels after making love, a correlation which also made him realize that women as well as Russia are really after his power. This brings us back to the Plan R provision that gives a lower echelon commander the power to order a nuclear counterstrike in the event that the president is taken out by a Russian sneak attack. Also remember that once the American bombers penetrate Soviet airspace, those bombers cannot turn back and must complete the mission, due to the fact that the normal radios in the bombers are switched over to the CRM-114 receiver, which is designed as the autonomic nervous system and the human body is designed to block out distractions. Recall now previous comparisons I made between the bomber's damaged CRM-114 receiver and the act of love, in which areas of the brain corresponding with self-control, fear, and anxiety are switched off during an orgasm. Therefore, the damaged CRM-114 receiver and orgasms are both symbolic of Ripper's belief that war decisions should not be left to politicians. Or to put this another way, there are some instances in which the act of thinking gets in the way, which is a principle correlating to the basic principle by which the Doomsday device and orgasms work by canceling out the possibility of human meddling. The damaged CRM-114 receiver is also symbolic of Ripper confiscating the radios of the soldiers at the Air Force Base at Burleson. Confiscating the radios cuts off the possibility of any outside interference. Additionally, confiscating the soldiers' radios keeps them ignorant to the fact that Ripper lied to them about Russia attacking America.
Zero tolerance for criminal aliens. Zero.
Again, let's recap by taking attack plan R, the missile strike, the B-52 bomber dropping to a lower altitude in order to conserve fuel and evade Russian radar detection, the jammed bomb door of the B-52 bomber, and comparing these elements in the film with the act of making love. Both attack plan R for Romeo and the bombers penetrating Russia's airspace are metaphors for the initiation of sexual intercourse. Next, the Russians fire a missile that damages the bomber's CRM-114 receiver. Consequently, the plane cannot receive any orders conflicting with its original order to nuke Russia. Other elements in the film, such as the Doomsday Machine, the soldiers on the base that have no radios and no way of communicating with the outside world, and the broken line on Ripper's direct telephone to the president are metaphors of both the damaged CRM-114 receiver and the act of love, in which the areas in the brain corresponding with intelligence, self-discipline, fear, and anxiety are disabled. A transcendent state that neuroscientist Gert Holstege describes as a void between consciousness and unconsciousness that not only renders women powerless, but that can also disconnect them from both the outside world and their own emotional feelings. In addition to destroying the plane's CRM-114 receiver, the Russian missile strike also ruptures the plane's fuel tank, resulting in a leak. This is a metaphor for premature ejaculation. Due to the plane's fuel tank leak, Major Kong selects the closer target at the ICBM complex at Karlovsk while flying the plane underneath Russian radar. Selecting a closer target to drop his bomb while flying lower to avoid Russian radar are Kong's attempts to complete the mission that Ripper gave him, as well as Ripper's attempt to prolong sexual intercourse without ejaculating and giving up his power. Due to the damage caused by the Russian missile strike, Major Kong has to manually open the bomb doors to release the bomb from the plane. Now recall Ripper's belief that Russia is contaminating America's drinking water. Also recall Ripper admitting that he has sex with women without giving them his essence. The bomber's jammed door, therefore, is analogous with Ripper trying to stop himself from ejaculating. But by now the power to do so is beyond his control, for in ordering the Strategic Air Command to bomb Russia under Plan R and then going on to confiscate all of the radios on the base to keep his soldiers both ignorant and focused, and then shooting himself in the head to avoid being tortured into giving up the recall code. And doing all of these things, Ripper ejaculates, metaphorically speaking, by abdicating his right mind, as President Merkin Muffley also ejaculates in the same sense by abdicating his right mind, by inviting a Russian spy into the war room, both of which are comparable to one experiencing an actual orgasm, which shuts off intellectual and rational circuits in the brain corresponding with self-discipline, objectivity, and common sense. The fluoridated water in Ripper's Russian conspiracy theory is analogous to enemy infiltration, such as in the cases involving Miss Scott using Buck Turgidson's red telephone, which happens to be a direct line to the president, and the Russian spy whom the president invites into the war room to see the threat board. Therefore, the fact that Russians only drink vodka and the fact that Ripper will only drink either rainwater or grain alcohol suggests that there is a chemical as well as a character distinction being made between those who drink vodka, rainwater, and grain alcohol and those who drink fluoridated water. So if fluoride is synonymous with carelessness, then this would make vodka, rainwater, and grain alcohol the opposite of carelessness, which would be vigilance, which makes sense when you consider the fact that Ripper warned his soldiers on the base to be on the lookout for Russians pretending to be American soldiers, as the Russian Desadetsky is actually a spy pretending to be a Russian ambassador, or something that he is not. But in addition to representing carelessness, fluoridated water is also analogous to the fatigue and emptiness that Ripper said he experiences after making love to women. Are there any other metaphors for fatigue and emptiness in this film? Yes. For instance, the fuel leaking out of the damaged bomber represents fatigue, as the plane, after dropping its nuclear bomb or load, represents the feeling of emptiness Ripper feels after making love to women. We can also apply Ripper's description of making love to the Doomsday device, as the women that sense his essence and power are comparable to Russian radar sensing the American bombers in its airspace. Due to the falling birth rates of Germany's white population, the Nazis deviated from its original promise that every woman would have her own man in a monogamous relationship. Children born out of wedlock and promiscuous behavior, once a moral shame, became a source of moral pride and necessity under the Lebensborn program that encouraged pure-blooded Aryan males to breed with pure-blooded Aryan females in order to produce pure-blooded Aryan offspring. Heinrich Himmler, chief of the SS, wanted every SS officer to father an illegitimate child before leaving for war. Compare the Nazis' Lebensborn program with Strangelove's post-war vision of hand-picking women to breed with outnumbered men in order to repopulate the planet. Remember, Ripper bragged about how the women he made love with could sense his power. Also remember that power in this film is synonymous with masculinity, which Ripper says he denies women. And remember that masculinity in this film is also synonymous with the bomb, which sets off the doomsday machine, which also happens to be a metaphor for the female orgasm. Taking all of these into account, we should now see how Strangelove gets the power to stand and walk at the end of the film. Hitler created the Nuremberg laws to purge the Aryan race of those classified as impure.
A foreign substance is introduced into our precious bodily fluids.
They're poisoning the blood of our country.
Which included those who were sick, weak, and deformed, while the Lebensborn program was also created to inbreed those whom Hitler considered pure, comparable with Strangelove's post-war scenario in which factors such as youth, health, fertility, intelligence, and skill sets would determine who would be selected to live and breed in the mine shafts and those who would be left to die of radioactive fallout on the surface after nuclear Armageddon. Therefore, Dr. Strangelove can no more control his impulse to walk and raise his supposedly dead arm to salute the president as the Fuhrer than Jack D. Ripper can control himself during the act of sex, the president can recall the planes from bombing Russia, or the doomsday machine can be untriggered after it has been triggered. Thanks for watching this analysis of director Stanley Kubrick's 1964 satire, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. If you like this video, I would appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and hit the bell to be notified of future film analysis such as this one. Thanks again, and God bless.